Good morning. This is Tom Besore, and I'm standing at the far eastern end of the Chicago Riverwalk. You can't go much further than this without getting wet. I'm on the south bank of the Chicago River, standing by this big granite block that pays homage to the reversal of the Chicago River. You can't really read the writing too well in this video, but the text says this is the monument of the millennium. And it's a historical marker commemorating the creation of the Chicago Waterway District in 1899, which set in force of motion a series of events that resulted in the reversal of the Chicago River, one of the great wonders of the world. And that was done to protect the water supply of the city of Chicago back during the heyday of commercial and industrial growth of this fine city. But anyway, here we are at the far eastern end of the Riverwalk, and I'm going to do a video to take you on a tour of this Riverwalk. Just this week they cut the ribbon and opened this eastern section between Michigan Avenue and the lakefront. I mean, the Riverwalk has been there in a very primitive form with a sidewalk, some trailers, some amenities. But in recent years, the city has been pumping a lot of money into the Riverwalk, trying to make it a little more accessible, a little more fancy. And if you visit other cities around the world, you notice the wonderful things that they've done to enhance the aesthetic appeal of waterfront property. It's a huge economic development opportunity that had largely been ignored during the development of Chicago. So we're a little late to the game, but slowly it's improving. And I just want to show it to you. The best way to see this, obviously, is to come out on your own, bring your family, bring your friends. I oftentimes will do live tours of the Riverwalk with my Windy City Explorers meetup group. You can look us up on the internet and you'll find that I do these walks maybe once a month with that particular group. I actually do events along the river all the time because I live in the neighborhood, and I enjoy sharing my passion of this city with others, and it's just kind of a fun thing to do. So I participate in a number of different groups, and we're always either walking or cycling or going on a boat. So look me up, get in touch with me, and come join us sometime, because there's nothing like being here to enjoy it in person. But anyway, the walk itself, if you were to walk this 1.25 mile section between here and Franklin Street, which is where the river tees to go north and south. But if you were to walk just this one section, this east-west section, it's about 1.25 miles, and it would take about 30 minutes at a decent pace. I'm probably going to make a few stops along the way, so this video will probably be about 45 minutes in length. And it's an experiment. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you leave me some feedback in the comments, and reach out to me and let me know how I can make the next one a little better. I do have at home a gimbal that supposedly smooths out the flow of the video, but it's a little cumbersome to use, and to be honest with you, it's kind of a nuisance. So right now I'm just using my iPhone XS, and it's mounted in a bracket, and I'm holding it with a very small flexible tripod. So it just seems a little easier to maneuver, and so that's a little background on the equipment. This is the Lakeshore Drive Bridge. They're in process of constructing a bicycle, a separate bikeway. You can see the people cycling on the sidewalk, but that path gets very congested with both pedestrians and bikes. And so they're actually going to punch a hole through that bridge house and through that bridge house, and they're going to be attaching a separate bikeway. And you can see a little bit of the framework on the other side of the river, where they have already constructed parts of this apparatus. And this is actually the third phase of a separated bikeway down here in the immediate neighborhood of the river and Navy Pier. So we're quite excited to see that finally come to fruition. I think they're just getting ready to start construction on this last section, and it'll be ready next year in 2020, we hope. So you will see a lot of ongoing construction. The Riverwalk is nowhere near complete, but it's complete enough that they can invite the public out to see the progress and to enjoy those improvements that they have made. Here's a little walkway underneath Lakeshore Drive where they've tried to beautify it. There's you know, the nice ceiling structure with lights, and some artwork has been installed just to try to make it look a little nicer than what it is walking underneath the bridge. Directly in front of me, coming into your view, is some new landscaped area that was not here last year. These are these first few trees are all new, as are the boulders. You can see they're still working on it. It's still a little bit blocked off. They've got some Adirondack chairs ready to go once they wrap up the construction. But this is all new. This used to be just flat, mucky, somewhat flooded land. But they installed drainage and they put in raised planters. They've added a bunch of seating. So you can really see the potential of this, how it's going to be so nice. You can hear the jackhammers in the background. So just to give you a closer idea, and they're installing a nicer railing right up at the river, and then they'll be getting rid of this temporary fencing through the course of time. But look at this beautiful landscaping along the river. This is the Riverview condominium complex. You could buy a townhome there at the base in excess of $1 million each. Some of the individual condo units can be had for, I don't know, upper sixes to well over $1 million. One Bennett Place is the newest building, the middle building there. Those are super expensive condos and rentals. And then you've got 474 Lakeshore Drive, which is a very modest condo building. You can get in there for less than $500,000 and have a beautiful view of the lake. The building itself is not much to speak of, but it's a very modest place. I like to say there's something for everyone in Chicago. And there it is, 474 Lakeshore Drive. So just a beautiful view down the river. Let's continue our walk. The roadway that you're looking at is the multiple level Wacker Drive. And it was put in the 60s and 70s. And the multiple levels, the point of it was to keep the truck traffic away from the, the regular automobile traffic. And that served a great purpose for a while. But I think it wasn't long before the city realized that that was really a terrible thing to do, to separate the river with this giant roadway. It was one of the big failures of urban planning, as far as I'm concerned, because now we're a little bit limited. This Riverwalk could be so much broader if that roadway were not there. So here's a little view of the Wanda Vista Tower. It's nearing completion. I believe that building is topped out, but they're still in process of putting the glass on it. And here's the Regatta condo tower, and then the Chandler condo tower, both in the New East Side neighborhood. It's really striking to me how many opportunities there are to live close to the lakefront and right on the Chicago River. You're going to see in a little while Marina Towers, which were constructed in the 60s, and people thought they were crazy for building that in downtown Chicago on the river. But boy, that was really a wise move way back when, because now everybody wants to live downtown. So anyway, you can see that they've done some nice landscaping. Obviously, some of these trees, like these big old ones that we're coming up to, have been here a long time. That's not new. But some new things are this sculpture. They don't even have an artist plaque here yet, but I'm sure they will. And then these green metal storage containers are the home of Urban Kayaks. They've been here for a few years now, and it's just a really quick and sloppy way to bring an amenity down to the riverfront. And it is very functional. It's served its purpose. Hundreds or thousands of people have come by here and rented a kayak. to actually go out into the Chicago River. But imagine the potential if they put a nice permanent structure here. And I'm sure that'll come. Maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, I'll be repeating this video, showing you the new beautiful buildings for the kayak rental. But for now, that's what we have to live with. I guess it's a question of politics and money. Chicago has so many different priorities, whether it's school or security or pension reform. We're lucky that they put this money towards the Riverwalk. The time is about 8 o'clock in the morning, and you can see there's a little variety of people here, but this gets really busy during the day a little later on. But look how many places there are to sit, and this is all brand new. In the past, you'd have to bring a folding lawn chair with you if you wanted to come out and sit by the Chicago River. But now they have bench after bench after bench. Across the river from me is the water cannon. It's also a commemorative piece of landscape architecture honoring the Water Reclamation District. And at the top of every hour, it shoots a water cannon across the river. That's kind of fun. I wish that were going off now. It must start at the 9 o'clock hour because it's only 8:05, and I thought that thing should be spouting its water, but maybe they start at 9 o'clock. It doesn't run all day. That's the City View apartment tower. If you want to rent, you don't have to own, but you can live right on the riverfront and enjoy a beautiful view of the river as well as the fireworks off to the east. And again, those are the Riverview condo towers and townhomes. And then way off on the right, you see Lake Point Tower, which is also one of the first buildings built out on the lakefront. And then you can see back to Lakeshore Drive, the Ferris wheel, and points beyond. I'm trying to be thoughtful in the time that I spend so that you can soak it all in and absorb the surroundings without actually being here. I'm actually prepping for a live walk, which I'm doing tonight. Tonight, which is Thursday, May the 16th, 2019, at 6 p.m., I'm hosting a group of people. We're going to start at the McCormick Bridge House Museum, and we're going to walk this path together and explore some of these new things. And as the group leader, I thought it might be wise for me to come out ahead of time and know my surroundings. So this object that we're coming up on now is yet another monument, another piece of art. It's actually a memorial to submarines, believe it or not. Submarines that were built in Manitowoc, Wisconsin during World War II. And there are 28 of them that were built up Lake Michigan, a couple hours from here, in Manitowoc, Michigan, or Manitowoc, Wisconsin. These 28 subs were built up there, and then they had to be transported down to the Gulf of Mexico. And so each of these 28 subs passed through this very location, being towed. I don't think they were under their own power, but they were brought down the Chicago River to the Illinois waterway system, to the Mississippi, and down to the Gulf of Mexico. I had no idea. This is new to me. And so they took one of these subs and they took the door and they turned it into this nice commemorative piece of art. You can't open or close the door, but if you're the adventuresome soul, you can actually crawl through the opening. And let me make this video really interactive and fun. I'll peek through here anyway, so you can see to the other side. I'm not going to crawl through there because I might drop my camera. But they have these commemorative bricks that show who helped to fund this. And here's a photo. This is actually a photo of the submarine as it passes under Lakeshore Drive. And it was, I don't know, I think that photo is doctored because it looks like that sub is under its own power. And also, why would you need to raise the bridge? Because you've got about 20 feet at least of clearance under that bridge. And is that superstructure greater than 20 feet on a sub? Maybe it is. But anyway, I'm still having a hard time believing that these subs were brought down the Chicago River. but a lot of people believe that to be the case, and they put this monument here. So that's really kind of cool. Okay, so looking onward, again you see the ugly understructure of Wacker Drive, which in this particular location consists of 3 levels. The very bottom level that we're standing on, there's a roadway behind that fence, and then there's middle Wacker, and then there's upper Wacker. And again, that roadway system was designed to move commercial traffic around the city, separating it from the rest of the city. It may have been a great thought in its time, but it was awfully short-sighted because it separated the city from this river. You can't really easily walk beyond that, although there are a couple of paths in certain places. This is the Sheraton Hotel, one of the largest convention hotels in the city. I understand this is where the President of the United States stays because there's a very secure room in there. Legend has it. And then beyond you see the Tribune Tower and the Wrigley Building. That's the Wrigley Building with the clock face on the left side of that rectangular building, and that's the Tribune Tower on the right-hand side. The Tribune Tower is in the process of being converted to condos. The Tribune has moved out, the building's been purchased by a private enterprise, and it's being converted to condominiums. Everybody wants to live in the city. And also in that location over by the Tribune Tower, they're going to be constructing a new glass and steel high-rise condo tower. It'll be another super tall tower. So we have so much development going on here in the city that it's really hard to keep up with. Behind this fenced-off area is an outfit called Island Party Hut. You saw their boats. They actually have, I see 4 boats here now. 4 little tiki boats, 1, 2, 3 in front of me, and then the 4th that I showed you just a minute ago. So it's an entertainment complex where they have food and beverages. Here's a little picture of what it's going to look like when it's finished. That's going to be very nice. So you can see the city is making an effort to spruce up the riverfront, and I'm so glad to see that the Island Party Hut is not going to be a series of shipping containers, because that's what it has been in the past. Just like urban kayaks, it consisted of a couple of shipping containers. So now we're starting to realize that there's more to it. Okay, that's the Cool Cat going by. That is a barge, and the Chicago River is still a very commercial waterway. And that particular barge is not towing or pushing anything right now, but every day we get 2 or 3 barges come through with various loads of construction material, chemicals, whatever. And it's quite fascinating to see. But the history of this river is a very industrial history. Right now, most of what we see is tourism-related things. But in the past, this river was simply a river of commerce, and it was a river of sewage before they reversed the flow. So the settlers of Chicago from the late 1800s, even well into the 1900s, the settlers of Chicago would not have recognized what we're looking at today, because their river was dirty and smelly, and it was strictly for commerce. Something like 300,000 ships called upon Chicago, and that's an accurate number. 300,000 ships called upon Chicago in the year of the Great Chicago Fire, 1871. And so the port of Chicago was busier than New York, San Francisco, Philadelphia combined. That's a statistic that shocked me, and that's why I memorized it. But Chicago used to be the largest port in America back in its day. So now it's primarily a river of tourism rather than a river of commercial and industrial uses. Today we have these tour boats. There's a dinner boat that you'll get a better look at up ahead when I get up there. But there's tour boats, dinner boats, there's kayaks on the river. There's all kinds of waterborne amenities. And I, myself, personally, would not want to find myself in that water. It's a lot cleaner than it was in the 1800s, but it's still quite a polluted waterway, which is kind of sad. So here's another plaza that they've constructed. And again, last year this area was all mud and dirt, and there were a couple of shipping containers parked here with bike rentals. And now you can see that it's still a work in progress, but they've obviously spruced it up a little bit, put in this landscaping and this plaza area for people to enjoy. And then this staircase is where you have to walk up 3 levels to get to upper Wacker Drive. This is kind of an interesting picture because you see all these people coming and going. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic here, crossing into Streeterville to the right and to the New East Side to the left. And there's a lot of traffic going between hotels during conferences. There's a lot of employees of Streeterville, whether they work in retail along Michigan Avenue, whether they work for Northwestern University, which is a huge employer, or whether they work in the hospitality industry. There's thousands, if not millions of people that call this place home during the day, and this is all the foot traffic. And you can see the direct result of building that roadway. All these people have to go up and down multiple flights of stairs. And how short-sighted was that back in the 70s to put this here? And how ugly is this vista that I'm showing you? So my dream and my hope for this area is that they construct buildings, or if they just panel off those that roadway. They could put giant murals. They could put artwork. But I think there's plenty of room there for smaller buildings, 3 or 4 story buildings that could actually be offices, or you could put some more restaurants there. So that's my vision, and who knows if it's shared by the powers that be. So that's we're right at Columbus Drive. This is the newest of the Chicago bridges. It was built, I think, in the 80s or 90s, and it lasted less than a year before it broke. So they don't build them like they used to. But that's the Columbus Drive Bridge. And here we're walking under kind of a derelict section. Yes, there is a panel up above my head, but when you see the panels west of Michigan Avenue, you'll come to appreciate what they're trying to do to spruce it up. They're putting stainless steel panels that look a lot nicer. Across the river from me, you can see the Odyssey Chicago River, which is a dinner boat, lunch boat. It's fully glass enclosed. It's quite reflective, so you cannot see inside right now at this time. But that's the newest tour boat addition to the river. That just came last fall to allow people to enjoy a meal as it goes up and down the river. Behind the ship there is the Gleacher Center, that low-rise building, University of Chicago, Booth School of Business. And then this tan building here is the NBC Tower. And then the glass and steel building behind it is a apartment building. And then the Dome building. Let me say a few words about that golden dome up there. That's the Intercontinental Hotel. And it used to be the Shriners owned that property before they lost it in the Depression. It's a Moorish style design, and behind the dome you can see a little bit of a smokestack kind of structure that was designed to be a port for dirigibles, for airships. Honest to God. And they built that thing in the 1920s, and then something happened called the Hindenburg disaster. That was the end of the dirigibles. But there's a photograph floating around on the internet of a dirigible circling Chicago, and might even have that building in its background. And that was a promotional video. I have done extensive research and have no verification that a dirigible ever landed at that location. But we do have photographs of dirigibles in Chicago. But again, it was for promotional purposes only. Here's the back of the Chicago's First Lady boat. They have 3 or 4 boats now that are really well regarded for taking people on boat cruises up and down the river. That's the official boat of the Chicago Architecture Foundation, if you want the official word. And they do a terrific job of bringing people up and down this river. So I'm just west of Columbus Avenue, and you can see it's more of the same. This is a work in progress. These juniper trees are ready to be planted in their spots. We even get a little construction activity here. I'm only about a third of the way down my planned path, and we're already 25 minutes into this video. This is also a cool boat, the Skyline Princess, run by Mercury Skyline Cruises. That's kind of a fun boat. No standing room, it's more of a seated experience, but that's an alternative to these other boats, which you can see have that roof deck on them, which people love to be out. Okay, here's another new place called the Northman Beer and Cider Garden. Not quite ready for business. but once they put in some pavers and landscaping, you can see it'll be a nice amenity. And it's not in a shipping container. I'm so thrilled. I keep mentioning that, but it's just been so silly over the past 3 to 5 years to see the city dropping these shipping containers along this riverfront and calling that the amenity. And I've just been keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that they do something nicer. And sure enough, they have. So these boats, these Chicago First Lady boats, have been here a long time. And every year they seem to improve the experience out here along the walkway. Boy, I really have to be careful with my video, because if I'm not watching where I'm going, I'm going to end up in one of those holes. It's a work in progress. Now you can see some utility to this ugly roadway system, because this is where the deliveries come from. All those boats need to be serviced with food and beverages and the different things that are required for them to work. And that roadway is just steps away from the boats. So from that perspective, they enjoy the utility of having lower whacker. But if you know anything about the history of Chicago and the crime and the homelessness, Lower Wacker Drive is not something we're particularly proud of. Okay, here's a great spot to stop and talk about the Apple Store. You can see the Apple Store across the river. That's new. That was finished last year. And that Apple Store and this building with the Fidelity logo at the base, those two buildings are on the property that used to be known as the James Kirk Soap Factory. Yes, soap factory. And there's pictures on the internet to prove it. Look up James Kirk Soap Factory, and you'll see that right there on Michigan Avenue in the river was this giant factory complete with smokestacks belching out fumes as they produced hundreds of thousands of pounds of pure soap. And the James Kirk Company was also known for being one of the first promoters of trading stamps. You know, where you'd buy a product and on the back of the product would be a coupon. And if you collected 6 coupons, you'd get a free product. You might know of S&H trading stamps back in the day. I don't think they use those anymore, but those of us of Generation X or before surely remember S&H trading stamps. But anyway, I'm mentioning that because you can still get trading stamps from the James S. Kirk factory on eBay. I got a bunch of them, and I passed them out during my walking tours. They're no good anymore, but I have like 150 of these cut coupons from packages of soap. But anyway, it shocks me. My story here is that this was all industrial. The river was, for dumping sewage. It was for delivering loads of lumber and steel and soap. But now it's all tourism related. You see an Apple Store. You see sightseeing boats at every turn. You can't walk 10 steps without being close to a tourist amenity. And so it has changed so much. And of course, that's the Wrigley building in front. But the average person that comes down here today has no idea of the history of this river. Steamships. Instead of these diesel-powered tour boats, they used to have steamships here. And the most famous one was the Eastland, which you may know capsized right here in this river, killing 700 people. But steamships used to ferry people over to the shores of Michigan. And it was a nice weekend excursion. I think for 25 cents you could hop on a boat and go to Michigan. And yes, you could still find the tickets and the coins that they used for the fare tokens. You could find those on eBay. But if you could tell, I'm very passionate and excited about the history of this river, and I love to share that passion with others, and that's why I do these walking tours. And again, I'm going to repeat myself over and over. It's much more fun to do this in person. But if you happen to live far away, if you're watching this video in Singapore or elsewhere in Europe, I understand. This is my opportunity to share my city with you. So we're coming up on the Michigan Avenue Bridge. Also called the DuSable Bridge, and that is in honor of Jean-Baptiste DuSable, who is regarded as the first non-native settler of this area. Marquette and Joliet, two famous Jesuit explorers, came through here in 1673, And in their journals, they wrote that this place would be important someday. Another explorer named De La Salle was also very well known for his comments about what Chicago is likely to become. And boy, if they could see it today, they'd feel like they'd been transported to some space age type of place. It'd be like the Jetsons. Do you remember the TV show, The Jetsons? Where they all drive around in spaceships all day? So here's a beautiful view of the Michigan Avenue Bridge and the Wrigley Building. The clock face on the Wrigley Building used to be cedar hands. Now it's machined aluminum. But history says that those used to be cedar. And then a look at Tribune Tower and the Apple Store and the Equitable Building is what they call that building with Fidelity in it. There also used to be a big warehouse where the Gleacher Center is, right on the riverfront. But that's all been torn down and converted into modern uses. It's fascinating to me that many times, or maybe even most of the time, they demolished the old buildings. But you'll see up ahead that sometimes they preserve the old buildings and convert them into office or retail. And that's really cool. When the river floods, as it does a couple times a year, this walkway is underwater. It's fun to come down here at that time and look at it from up above and see this path underneath the water. Here's the example of how they put stainless steel coverings on the underside of the bridge to make it a little more pleasant to walk down here. And remember me mentioning you can't walk very far without running into more boats. The yellow one is the Chicago Water Taxi, and that services all three branches, this main branch, and also goes up north towards North Avenue, and it also goes south towards Chinatown. So you can hop that boat for $4 and go down to Chinatown, and you have to walk, I don't know, 20 minutes from the boat landing to actual Chinatown itself. And then you can enjoy a meal and hop right back on. What a great thing to do in the summer. Here's the McCormick Bridge House Museum, which sadly is locked more than it is open. But this is an old bridge house, and they've converted every floor to interpretative exhibits. So it's really a treat to go in there. You can look out the round window at the river, and they have a bunch of historical materials that talk about the Chicago River and Illinois waterways in general. That's called the McCormick Bridge House Museum. And this is right here at the northwest corner of Michigan and Wacker. So if you find yourself to the northwest corner of Michigan and Wacker and walk down this staircase, that's how you get to where we are. And this is where my walking tour starts tonight. So I'll have people meet me right here. It's a nice place to sit and wait for people. Up ahead you see the corncob towers of Marina City, which was the first residential development along the riverfront back from the 60s. Boy, if you would have bought one of those, well, you couldn't have bought one, they were apartments. But even if you would have bought one of those when they converted to condos, you'd be very happy with yourself because the value of those has increased so greatly. And yes, I am ignoring another building that I'm walking by. I'm sure you've seen it in the video, but I'm just not going to say anything about it. You see the canyon here. This is the Chicago River Canyon. All these high-rises, most of which are commercial in nature. I see the Marina Towers, those are residential. And then that bluish-green tower is an apartment building. So there's a bunch of places to live along the river if you so choose. But mainly this river is just a canyon. And that's by virtue of that Wacker Drive. Those buildings are all fronting Wacker Drive, which separates the river from the rest of the city. And I know you have to have a transition between the river and the rest of the city, but I think that roadway was a terrible idea. But these are progressive ideas that I'm talking about, not ideas that were popular in the 50s, 60s, 70s when it was all about the automobile. But what a great view. What a great view down the river. Thanks for being with me on this walk. It's been 35 minutes, and I hope you're enjoying it. I hope I'm not too monotone. if I can figure out my technology, I might be able to drop a audio track into this video so that it won't be so boring. I'm in the initial stages of developing my craft, and this is one of the first videos that I'm doing. So it may end up in the blooper reel, as they say in Hollywood, but you got to start somewhere. I've been planning and planning and planning, and today I decided to do something. So I grabbed my phone and my tripod, and here I am. And again, I'm going to be interested to go back and watch this and see if the movement is too jittery, because I do have a gimbal, but the gimbal has a mind of its own. It tends to go off on me, or I hit the wrong button, it'll zip upwards or downwards. It's actually quite frustrating. So here you're going to see a nice picture of the water taxi coming into view and down the river. So I'll stop here so you can enjoy that. And here's another thing I cannot convey to you on the video. The spot where I'm standing right now, especially as this taxi goes by churning up the water, it stinks. It smells like sewage. I don't see anything in the water. The water is this odd greenish, blue-green hue, but I don't see any debris or anything, but it sure smells. So here's a great view of the Marina Towers. By the way, you're not allowed to park your own car. That lower section is all parking garage, and they have porters that park the cars for you because they don't want anybody accidentally backing into the river. Those cars are all backed up to the very edge of their individual levels. And also those porters get to the different parking levels by way of a elevator, like a conveyor belt that only has room for their feet. It's like a vertical conveyor belt. And they used to have a bunch of those in Chicago and New York. This is the only one left, I think, in Chicago, where the servicemen actually hop on this conveyor belt. And I haven't heard of any recent deaths or injuries, but it doesn't sound very safe to me. Off on the horizon, you can see a crane constructing a new office building at Wolf Point, and so I'll be getting up to that spot in probably 15 or 20 minutes if I don't get tired of talking. And then up here, we're just shy of State Street. This is a spot where, two things, they just put in the Chicago Brew House. This is a new spot to come and enjoy a beer outside. And then up above here is the Illinois Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And this is a quiet place of solitude where you can honor those that we lost during the Vietnam War. And it's really nice. There's a multi-level stadium type of seating. This is full of people during the day. There's a staircase that goes back up to Wacker Drive and Wabash Street. But this all grass. You can't really see the grass, but there's grass on each level of that stepped plaza. And then here is the fountain. We'll have a moment of silence so you can take in all these names. The plaque starts on the left with 1962, and it ends on the right with 1973. And in between, you've got a whole period of where people lost their lives fighting the battle in Vietnam. And if you notice, there's this set of flowers up there. So this is still current affairs. This is my generation. I was born in 1965. And so, lest we forget, this memorial reminds us that world peace is not to be taken for granted. But these are a little bit old. Somebody's left them here a little while ago. There's a piece of paper attached to it with the name and probably information about the decedent. I don't want to disturb it, but I just wanted you to see that this is still very emotional, very raw for a lot of people. Maybe you'll recognize the name as I scroll through here. Our own little miniature Vietnam War memorial. And here's a little plaque. I'll give you a moment to see if you can read it. recognizing each of the branches of service: the Navy, the Army, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Reserve, the Merchant Marine, the National Guard. So it's kind of cool that there's a place to recognize those people that are responsible for the liberties that we enjoy. I'm trying not to be too sing-songy in my commentary. There's a balance. There's a balance to be had. Okay, this is a great demonstration of how they have done this Riverwalk. When these bridges were constructed, this is just a big concrete channel. There was no place for people to walk. It was not designed for a Riverwalk. In fact, here's a good example over there across the river at the base of the IBM Plaza. There's no Riverwalk over there. There will be one day, because they're going to do the same thing over there that they've done on this side. But you can see the utilitarian nature of the Chicago River was such that they didn't even have a place for a boat to dock, just a big concrete wall. And then what they've done is come back and they put in these pilings underneath this walkway. They had to create, I think it's called a cofferdam, if my engineering technology is correct. They created a cofferdam to divert the water around the construction area so that it would dry out. And then they drilled pilings into the riverbed, and then they built on top of the pilings a little walkway. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But they paid some engineers a lot of money to develop a system to accomplish this without damaging the existing infrastructure. God forbid they should poke a hole in the river or something like happened in the past. So anyway, that's a great example of how the Riverwalk has been constructed in places where there is still open space. Like right here, they were able to put in a sidewalk, but where the bridges meet the river, there was no room, and they had to put in separate walkways. "42 minutes. I'm going to stop this video at 60 minutes, so I better hurry up." Did I mention that I am a Jeffrey Bear wannabe? Jeffrey Bear is a famous commentator, WTTW Channel 11, and he used to give tours for the Chicago Architecture Foundation, and he was discovered by somebody who said, "You'd make a great television commentator." So if Jeffrey Bear is watching my simple video, I would love to meet you one day. You can inspire me to go on to great things. So here's the base of Marina Towers. Still has a marina in it. And here's a shout out to my friend Marco Lucht, who used to operate that marina. He worked there for like 30 years, and now he works at Crowley's Yacht Yard. But he's got a lot of stories to tell about this marina. And then the area up above where the tents are, that's now a steakhouse, but that used to be an ice skating rink. And again, you can find pictures of this stuff on the internet. This was an amazing complex when it was built in the 60s. It included residential apartments, it included commercial building. ABC7 had their studios here for a while. There's a hotel back there now. So it was like a city within a city. Way ahead of its time. Built in the 60s. And then up ahead you see the brown little building that's now dwarfed by skyscrapers around it. That's the Reed Murdoch building, which was a food warehouse. And there were other food warehouses right here. I think even where Marina Towers were, there was a food warehouse, and those were torn down. So we're really lucky to have the Reed Murdoch building, which has been converted into a commercial office type of use. So if you ever have opportunity to go in their lobby, you can see some interpretative photographs, exhibits that talk about that purpose of that building. You're looking at City Winery, which has been installed underneath the roadway, and that's an example of what I'm hoping will come to the eastern part of the path, where I showed you it was so ugly underneath the road. Here's an example of how they've built up a commercial enterprise and hidden the roadway. So that looks really cool. So there's all kinds of places to walk. I have to be careful here that I don't make the wrong step and end up in the water. But they allow you to dock boats here now. I think it costs $50. But if you're running around on a powerboat on the Chicago River, you can probably afford the $50 dock fee, especially if you have 10 or 20 people on your mega yacht and you want to stop at the City Winery. But the beauty of all this is that you don't have to pay a dime if you just want to walk and enjoy it like I'm doing right now. Coming up on Dearborn Street. The Chicago River used to be spanned by swing bridges, and a swing bridge has a pillar in the middle of the river, and the bridge rotates open and closed. And as you can imagine, that took up a lot of space in the middle of the river, and that was old technology. So back in the 1900s, each and every one of these bridges, swing bridges, was replaced with a bascule bridge. And we've got like 25 of these bascule bridges, and they operate with a series of counterweights and very small motors that get the bridge moving, and then the weight takes over and pops them up. It's fun to be down here on this Riverwalk when they're bringing sailboats through, because they have to raise all the bridges for the sailboats. And they do that twice a year. I mean, multiple weekends, but generally 2 periods a year. In the spring, to bring the boats out to the lake, and then in the fall, to bring them back in. The name of this boat is Gotta Go Now. There's a website called marinetraffic.com, and if you go to that website, you can pull up a map and drill down to any area that's of interest to you. I like Chicago, and you can see these boats. Each of these boats have a GPS tracker in them, and they publish their whereabouts on the internet. And it's been a little bit of a hobby of mine to take pictures of these boats and upload photos, because it's a user-generated database, and I even have some photo credits on there. So look up marinetraffic.com, and you can see the ships as they go up and down the river. It's kind of fun. Here's the Tiny Tap, another food service place along the river. And look at all this seating. I was here yesterday at the noon hour, and all the seating was full. Got to come experience it firsthand. That's the Reed Murdoch building, originally a food warehouse. Then it became a city building. The city of Chicago owned it, and they had traffic court in there. Many of the older generation remember going in there to contest or pay traffic tickets. And then the property was in disuse for a number of years, and then purchased by a developer who converted it into a modern Class A office building with some retail on the ground floor. You can see they have a restaurant along the water level, so that's kind of cool. This area between Clark and LaSalle Street, right here where I'm heading, this is where the Eastland was parked in 1915. The Eastland was a steamship that was to be used to ferry like 3,500 people to a company picnic in Michigan. And that steamship parked right here. And at the time in 1915, there was no stadium seating. This was just dilapidated old wharf, about as mucky and gross as you can imagine it. But anyway, the steamship parked here and loaded all these people early in the morning. It was in July, and it was kind of going to be a hot, muggy day, but people immediately went into the ship and just loaded it full. The ship had space for 3,500 people, and instantly and silently at some point, I think people would enter the ship and they'd immediately go to the riverside to look out over the water, and that put the ship off balance. And the ship was top heavy, and slowly and silently the ship just rolled. It took like 10 seconds for the ship to roll, and all of a sudden you got 3,000 people in the water. And 700 of them perished. Those 700 were below decks or got trapped in the commotion. And a huge disaster. I think it was the worst loss of life on the Great Lakes, was the Eastland disaster. And you can look that up on the internet and see photos. The photos are just so shocking. But this is the exact spot. And this is a new amenity. This was just put in here last year, a place of remembrance. They do educational seminars here. They do some artistic performances. These steps are a great place for these office workers to come and enjoy lunch and watch the water traffic go by. But again, you got to pass over Wacker Drive. There's 2 levels of Wacker Drive here. The hidden level is behind the seating here, and then the upper level is the street level. Here comes another water taxi. It's just so much fun to be down here and to enjoy this. But this is a new phenomenon. In the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, even in the 90s, this was not here. It was a wasted opportunity. And now they're finally catching up with common sense to say people might enjoy this. And so they have been spending millions to bring people down to the smelly Chicago River. I say that because I'm still smelling the foul odor. And I don't know what they're going to do about that. This is still a very essential waterway. It's a drainage path. When it rains and pours, this path is underwater. And it's built to withstand that. They just block it off and tell people not to come down here. But these walkways do go underwater 2 or 3 times a year. And it's fascinating to watch from the bridges. But what a cool place to walk. This is my city. This is one of the things I love about Chicago, is the vitality, the energy of these people. It's not overcrowded. There's really no reason for these people to be down here. They're just taking an alternate path to work, or they have some time on their hands and they're going for a jog. But these people are making a special effort to come down and be on the river. And who would have known that this would be desirable? You see the train going by the Wells Street Bridge up ahead of me? That's one of 2 bridges that are double-decker bridges that allow the L train to traverse on the top level. One here at Wells Street, and the other is at Lake Street. So again, we're looking at Wells Street, and beyond that bridge is the Merchandise Mart, which was at one time America's largest commercial building. And lately, as commerce has diversified and trade has diversified, meaning that it's no longer so intensely localized, the Merchandise Mart kind of fell out of favor and they had to reinvent themselves. And so the owner of that building has reinvented it into a commercial center for the modern economy. That's a green, sustainable building. They've retrofitted it with all kinds of energy-saving features. Water, fuel, electricity, to make it a very sustainable operation. And there's some of Chicago's most innovative and exciting technology companies in there at a company called 1871. And there's a bunch of other ventures in there also taking up the space. But it used to be the Merchandise Mart, where people would go to, commercial buyers would go to purchase merchandise for department stores all over the world. There goes another little water taxi. And then you see the construction of the new office tower. Immediately behind that office tower is a new apartment tower that was built last year. And then next year they're putting up a 3rd building in that same plot of land. That's crazy. I didn't think that plot of land was big enough. And the plot of land I'm speaking of is known as Wolf Point. And if you Google or search on the internet for Wolf Point, you'll recognize the historic significance of that spot, which is where the natives met the Europeans and conducted trade in the early days of Chicago. Here's a gelato place that has yet to open. And then behind that line of steel spikes, there are water features. They're not on at the present moment, but there's a series of spouting waterfalls that make a playful display, and you can go up the steps and walk along that water, and it's really kind of cool. The kids love it. That's another new features. This is all new stuff. This series of plastic docking, this is all new. I don't know why this is here. I don't really see a opening for people to get on there. I imagine it's for boats, but again, I don't know the specific purpose. I'm going to walk up here so that you can see the water area. Hopefully it won't turn on while I'm walking across. You can see it's wet, so it's been on. And then there's this series of lights. Oh, there's a good view of the trains. That's a cool picture. But again, all along here are a series of spouting water features that make an artistic display complete with changing colors. It's more of a nighttime thing, but I've definitely seen it on during the day. I just don't know why it's not on right now at this moment. But I'm hoping it doesn't turn on until I pass. Kind of cool. My video is going to be a little bit longer than an hour because I'm already at 56 minutes and I got about 10 minutes left of things to show you. But if you wanted to walk this stretch or bike it or jog it, you could do so much less than an hour. It's probably a half hour if you just walk it end to end. But I have this trouble that I like to stop and talk. And I'm always stopping and meeting people that I know on the path. Chicago is a small city. That's what I love about it. Okay, now let me say a few words about Art on the Mart. This is new as of last year. They've installed a projector apparatus on the opposite side of the river, and they project colorful artwork onto the wall of the merchandise mart at night, and it's absolutely beautiful. So we're going to see that tonight during our walking tour. Really looking forward to that. Okay, you haven't seen a lot of nature on this walk because, as I've mentioned, the Chicago River here is just channelized. It's a big concrete drainage system. I'm going to wait for this train to pass. In an attempt to reintroduce a little bit of nature to the Chicago River, they've come up with this grand experiment to put in these floating planting beds, which obviously in the wintertime go dormant and it all dies. And here we are in the middle of May, and they have yet to reintroduce formal plantings here, but you can see some of the leftovers. But these are floating planting beds. And in addition to the greenery on top, there's also a substructure below these things that provide for fish habitat. And how well that works is quite dubious in my mind, because I don't know that there are too many fish in the Chicago River to take advantage of it. But at least they're trying. It's an experiment to see if they can put some nature back into the Chicago River. But I find this to be a little funky. I think they should plant tulips or something in there. But the point is to have native plants that might have existed. Because believe it or not, looking at all this commercial concrete, steel, iron, there was a time when none of this was here. There was a time that this was swampland. There was a time that there were not multiple levels of Wacker Drive or any of these other surrounding streets. There was a time that this was a natural environment. And that is so foreign to us today. But you can see artistic renderings in the history books of how the Chicago River looked back when the settlers first encountered it in the 1600s. And it was nothing like what you're seeing today. I mean, imagine if you were to go camping out in a state park or something. That's the environment. This used to be raw wilderness, raw swampy wilderness, complete with wild onions, which some argue is the origin of the name Chicago, a Native American term for wild onion, Chicago. I learned all this stuff on the internet. I wonder if it's true. Beautiful merchandise mart. And then looking back at the Wells Street Bridge. So this is what you get with Tom Besor and the Windy City Explorers. You get raw, unedited, personal commentary, unscripted commentary I hope I'm doing a good job. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you come back for more. I hope you come to some Windy City Explorers events. We're on the meetup platform, so you can learn all about it. And come join us live in person. And one of the greatest things about the Windy City Explorers meetup group is meeting other people. That's the whole point of it. There's 8,000 people in that group. And they all come because they like to be entertained and engaged. They like to be physically active, walking around neighborhoods all over the city. But most of all, they like to meet new friends that share common interests. And it's a wonderful group. Started out with 2 people, and now it has 8,000 members. It grows and grows every year. It's free. I don't charge a dime. But those of you that know my professional background know that I'm a real estate broker and I'm an estate planning attorney. And believe it or not, I get clients out of the group. That's my reward. But it's not the purpose. The purpose is just to bring people together. This is one of my favorite buildings here ahead of us. It's an office building and it's got that arch. And just below the top of the arch is a balcony. And that's the only office with a balcony. And I want to know who's in there. I want to know if that can be my office. But the arch is somewhat symbolic, maybe of the St. Louis Arch. I don't know if you can see it well in the video, but it's a very reflective glass coating. And right underneath the arch, within the arch itself, I can see the river. And I can see the river moving. I can see the little waves. Oh, this is the Lake Street Bridge. So you can see a couple of trains going across there. I mentioned earlier that there are 2 bridges that allow trains to pass, and that was the Wells Street Bridge we saw earlier, and now the Lake Street Bridge. So that's kind of cool. This building where the 2 trains are just parting, that's another new office tower. It's kind of cool. See the architecture at the bottom. It comes together in a narrow point, and you wouldn't think that's possible. How does that building stay up? And believe it or not, there's a water damper stabilization system. I'm sure I'm butchering the description, but it involves thousands of gallons of water somewhat high in the building somewhere in a utility area, and the weight of that water sloshing around prevents excessive movement to the building. Honest to God. Now, I learned that on the internet. Is it true? I think so, but you'll have to research it yourself. But there's a water dampening stabilization system in that particular building. And then back over here, this is the small parcel of land where they're building 3 new buildings. They built that apartment tower last year. They're building this office tower now. And then in the middle, they're going to build another commercial building. And I feel bad for the building behind, which is the old apparel center, now the Holiday Inn. They used to have a beautiful view of the river. They used to have a beautiful view of the river to the east. They used to have a beautiful view of the river to the north and to the south. And now these 3 buildings are completely obscuring the view from the apparel center. But the good thing about these buildings, there's a lot of people that are anti-development, but the good thing about these buildings is that they're installing a Riverwalk over there, where there used to be no Riverwalk. You can see right now kind of the raw shore with the rocks and the shrubs. This was a no man's wasteland before these buildings. And when it's all over and done with, there will be a beautiful walkway and more seating, just like they've kind of done over here. It's not going to be the same setup, but this area over here used to be raw, junky area. There'd be abandoned cars over here. There'd be people living in tents. And now it's been converted into this meeting spot and complete with this new Riverwalk. And you can see how glorious this is. I was here yesterday also, and there's just loaded with people. Now here they're trying to hide the roadway with this artistic installation, and I have no idea what it is, and I did not get a close look at it yesterday, so you're going to benefit from that. It just appears to be little foil pieces that blow in the wind. And you'll have to look up on the internet who is the artist and what is the purpose. It's paper. Oh, it's just like a paper banners. This is like banner material, very flexible. I thought maybe it was metallic. I guess that's why it's quiet. But here, again, more walkway. This yellow structure is a mock-up of a permanent art piece that's going to be installed, designed by Santiago Calatrava, who's known for his wing-like architecture. And so I think in that very spot there's going to be a permanent art piece. To be honest, I hope it looks a lot better than that, because that doesn't really inspire me so much. But that's going to go there. And then here we've got some Adirondack chairs. I don't know why they're positioned this way, but usually they're all spread out along this grass. And here's our view. But this is Wolf Point. This is where the first floating bridge was put across the Chicago River. Just beyond our field of view is the old Kinsey Street Bridge, which was the first rail bridge into Chicago. Oh, and I think I will mention that the first railroad station, the Chicago Northwestern Railway Station, used to be where the Merchandise Mart is. That was a beautiful, grand train station, and there's pictures of it on the internet. But it was not practical because there was only one bridge crossing the river over there leading into that, and thousands of trains needed to use that every day. So back in the early 1900s, they tore down that train station and they built the new Chicago Northwestern Station, which today we know as Ogilvie Station, but that was the replacement train station. But I kind of enjoy the old-fashioned pictures of the original train station, which is where the Merchandise Mart was. It was called the Wells Street Station. But anyway, this is a very important place in Chicago history, where the settlers and the natives met and traded furs and food and products. Up here, up on this side of the river, was a place called the Wigwam, which was where Abraham Lincoln was nominated to the presidency. Also along this riverfront, after the treaties with the Native Americans, they did a final war dance. I can't remember the year, but the war dance started way back down by Michigan Avenue, and the Native Americans were all dressed up in their war feathers and paint and their tomahawks and their drums, and they did the most ferocious war dance, and it was symbolic in nature. Thankfully, they did not resort to violence, but the commentary at the time was that it could easily have turned into a violent confrontation, but the settlers allowed it to continue as a means for them to recognize their culture and their history. There's a wonderful write-up about that war dance. You'll have to look that up on the internet, and possibly I'll provide a link in the commentary to this video. But you can see how much history there is here in Chicago. It's just every time you turn around, there's some new fact that it just gives you pause to think, my gosh, this is such a different world than it was back in the 1800s. And don't get me wrong, I'm very happy to live today in the age of electricity, air conditioning, and automobiles. But I just have this fondness for the way it used to be, and I feel a little bit, especially in our turbulent political times, I feel a little bit sad that life isn't as simple as it used to be. Okay, that's enough political commentary, and I'm 8 minutes over my 1 hour presentation. Thank you so much for riding along with me today. Please send me a message, write a comment to the video if there's a spot for it. Call me up. My number is 312-725-0223. I do these videos to leverage my voice, to reach out to people with my passion for the history, past, present, and future of Chicago. But the real purpose of this is, again, to leverage my voice and to reach out to you. And only if you reach back to me will this be a true success. I can't tell you how many wonderful friends I've met from my tours and my events that I produce. And it has to be reciprocal. We could be the best of friends, but we don't know one another yet. So call me up, 312-725-0223. Let's go out for coffee, for a beverage, for lunch, and let's share some stories together. Have a great day, and I hope to see you at the Windy City Explorers. Bye-bye.